Hi, it's Michael Young from Digital Storytellers. We're at the social marketplace, and I'm sitting with Durreen Shahnaz. Durreen is a TED Fellow who's created the world's first social stock exchange. She's calling it Impact Exchange. She's also called herself a defiant optimist, and I think it must be the resilient Bangladeshi part of her that aspires to change the world in the face of adversity. Durreen, thanks for joining us here today.
Thank you for having me.
So, here we are at the social marketplace. How does it feel to be witnessing Australia's first social stock exchange, even though it's only a simulated?
I think it's really exciting, and I think Australia now is sort of ready to think about the next steps and how to grow this space. And I think simulation like this makes people not only think about it, but actually put it into action. So I think this whole notion of getting that $10,000 to invest into something is a wonderful way for people to get that action, going. We're saying, okay, I can do something with my money. So it's great. So far, I've been really impressed.
Now, you've had the opportunity to meet a lot of people from the sector who are thinking about how they can create impact investment. You've been doing it, blazing a trail now for a number of years. What have people been asking you?
It's for me, it's been interesting because I have to say, I'm actually amazed to see how much similarities there are between Australia and, say, a place like Singapore, where I live now, because they're both wealthy countries. And interestingly, I think one side of that wealth is also the fact that because a lot of the needs are taken care of by the governments, I think it takes away perhaps a little bit of that hunger in trying to make things happen in a very, I would say, positively destructive way. So I think that's, I know it sounds like an oxymoron, but you will, but I think something like this is a good start for people to start thinking how they can do more than what they're doing and how they can actually think big and they can think beyond Australia. And I think that's very important, as well.
Tell us maybe what feedback you've been giving people about what you see here in terms of...
I think, honestly, everyone I've been talking to, I've been sort of really trying to carry the Asia flag and telling them they really have to be thinking how to do what they're doing well in Australia, but then also think about the next step in looking at Asia. Because the reality is, for this space to grow, we have to think global. We actually have to think how we can change the system to make it work for everyone. I mean, this whole notion is, if you step back, is really creating social capital markets, right? A capital markets that works for all and everyone is a participant. So we have to obviously first take care of the need in Australia, but then have to say, okay, now how do we do it, for Cambodia? And how do we get a Cambodian investor to work for Australia, invest in an Australian entity and vice versa. So I think that global aspect of it and the interconnection is really what's going to make this market grow and grow and grow, and for us to have a wonderful future. That's where I think a lot of people are starting to talk about that.
Is Australia behind on this front? Do you feel like we have some catching up to do?
I think Australia, perhaps in certain aspects, I think it's actually ahead. For example, the social impact bonds that are now have been created, and some more are in the process. I think from what I've learned, even the structuring of it is quite different from what it originally was, how it was done in the UK. And I think that shows progress, and that also shows leadership, in terms of getting something, an instrument like that into the market. But I think what will be nice to see now, that trickling down from that level of the government and some of the banks getting involved, and trickling down, and really seeing in terms of the entrepreneurs, how they can sort of take the business that they have and take it to the next level. I think perhaps the other thing in Australia, which will be good to see, is much more of direct investments happening into these organizations. I mean, there is a lot of wealth in Australia, and it'll be nice to see that wealth acting like a venture capital wealth, into organizations. And I think that's very important.
What do you think we should, if we were to come over to your side of the pond, as they say here in Australia, what do you think we'd have to learn from Asian countries and the experiences over there?
In Asia, what's happening is this whole marketplace is growing, I would say, pretty much without government involvement. Yes, there are certain countries where the government is trying to get this space off the ground, like in Korea, like in Singapore, and maybe a little bit in Thailand. But I would say the countries that's most of the work that's happening, the governments are really not that involved. And if you look at it, the space, why did this space evolve? This space evolved because there was not enough philanthropic money to take care of the social need. There was not enough government money to take care of the social need. And it was really a way to see how can we get private sector capital to help take care of the social need, right? So in some ways, I think that allowed for the work that we're doing in the countries we work, for the private sector to come in and answer some of that need, with their capital and back the organizations who are doing this work. And I think it'll be, and I think it's just the beginning. I mean, we are seeing a lot of capital coming in, but I think it's we can definitely see this sort of really trickling into many countries. Now, interestingly, what we do see, which makes me really happy, is the fact that we do see investors coming from poor countries as well. So it really shows it's just because it's Bangladesh or Cambodia or Indonesia or Laos, Philippines, it does not mean that it doesn't have wealthy people there. So there are people who can invest, and our goal is to basically make them come in and be impact investors, and we're managing to do that. So I think it is, and that's quite rewarding, right? It's no longer sort of thinking, okay, how do we get the funding from the West, to actually change things the way things are working in the East, but really is, it's sort of the way we call it, it's Asia's solution for Asia's problem, right? And of course, it would be nice if we then kind of go global from there.
Okay. Now, this one, I just have a personal question for myself, which is, your home country of Bangladesh, right? So I wanted you to tell us a little bit about Bangladesh and whether you think that's an impact investment destination, or do you tell people that? I'm kind of curious.
Right. I think Bangladesh definitely is a destination for impact investing, but I believe the growth has happened in that country for this space in a little different ways, because it's a country that came out from a very devastating war 40 years ago, and I think it took the country a long time to get up to speed. And the NGOs played a big role in getting the country to where it should be in terms of growth, and that growth trajectory, I should say. And I think at a process, because of that, I think their country has probably more than enough NGOs at this point. So when you have NGOs and when there is a bit of thinking that you can get free money more easily than investment money, I think it's a bit of a change in thinking. Having said that, there are a handful of entities that are there who are doing really good work, who are social enterprises, who are, of course, financially sustainable and giving, obviously, a social return as well. And these are entities in the energy sector, these are entities in fair trade, so there are small ones coming in. But Bangladesh also, what I always think of is, in a way, it is a leader in showing how good practices can happen for non-for-profits as well. And a good example of that is BRAC. BRAC's budget is $1.4 billion a year. I mean, it's a massive corporation, and I believe 80% of their funding comes from their own work. So BRAC is one entity that we have worked with, and we are continuing our work with them, where we are looking at basically how to give universal health coverage in Bangladesh. Now, of course, traditionally you would think that would come from actually health insurance, right? And people will buy a premium for the health insurance. Now, again, in countries like Bangladesh, where people have to make a choice all the time, whether to buy food or, give the child an education, buying a premium is not high on the list. So you really have to be creative in terms of how you create financial structurings where the people can benefit from. So case in point, one of the things that we worked on was this instrument we created where people, mostly the families, are sort of financially devastated when they are hit by a catastrophic illness or if they have some sort of an accident, right, in the family. So we said, okay, no matter what you said, they're not going to buy the premium, right? So how do you actually help these families so they don't, even if they're above poverty line, they go below the poverty line, with an illness like this. So what we created was a financial structuring which allowed for these people to take a loan when they come into the hospital to pay for the bill. But taking into account sort of the actuarial tables, and we worked with an insurance company in terms of the payment and certain things which will pay. We created a structure where some of the funding came in as a grant, but the rest of it actually can be bonds. That is how it's structured in different layers. And it looks like BRAC is going to do the pilot of it, and if this is going to be rolled out, within next 5 years or so, there will be universal health coverage in Bangladesh. So this is something which is very exciting, and it's big in scale. And if you think about impact investing, it really does take that to the next level. It's really not about just putting an investment into a fair trade company or putting investment into a clean energy company, which is helping the poor, which absolutely is part of the equation. But the way I look at it is the equation it's a spectrum. Okay, there's capital need in every level, and for this to scale, we need to have basically financial structuring done, which can absorb these big needs and absorb big capital that can come in. So this is a very good example, and I think in some ways, once again, Bangladesh comes through, and this is one of the biggest financial structurings we're looking at, and we're also now looking to replicate in the same work in some of the Southeast Asian countries, so which is very exciting, and then, of course, for these entities to be listed on our exchange.
Excellent, Durreen. Thanks so much for that. I really look forward to seeing what you create in Asia, especially in my shared passion of Bangladesh as well. And thanks very much for your time today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.